In this video, we're going to talk about ITP 2.1, which is the intelligent tracking prevention by Safari and the Apple browsers, which restrict how we can track and which cookies we can use. All and more coming up. Hey there, and welcome back to another video of MeasureSchool.com, teaching you the data-driven way of digital marketing. My name is Julian. On this channel, we do tutorials and talk about tracking, and we are live right now as well. So if you don't want to miss out on any future live streams, definitely subscribe to this channel. Now, today I'm on here live. Happy to have everybody who is here on this channel joining me in the live chat. We are going to talk about ITP, the Intelligent Tracking Prevention by WebKit, which is the Safari browsers and the Apple browsers in general, because it kind of changes how we will do tracking in the future. So let's dive right in. We are gonna move over here and look at, first of all, what was announced. The intelligent tracking prevention is a technique, a technology that was pushed forward in the last year, really, from Apple and the browsers. Apple and its browsers. The technology that is built on WebKit, and this is what the Safari browsers are based on. So this is the engine that runs the Safari browsers. Now, Apple has announced that they made a big push in order to help people out in their privacy concerns. That is from their devices that they obviously sell, but now has also ported over to the browsers. And in the browsers itself, they have announced this intelligent tracking prevention, which really should prevent you from, or it's really targeted to privacy, but then also especially retargeting. What do I mean by that? Well, if I go to any kind of news website, I'm here on Bloomberg, I get retargeted. And this is when I, for example, looked at Tableau at some point. They might be able to show me advertising on a different website like Bloomberg.com. Now, retargeting is something that has been around for a long time, but Apple has actually said people don't really like it because they are being followed around. And therefore, they have come up with this intelligent tracking prevention. Now, how does this actually work from a technical perspective? Well, when we are on the website itself, there is an iframe that actually shows the ad. We can look at this iframe, and this is really what the ad is displayed, and this is displayed through the Google service. So we see here that the source is actually Google. Now, when we click on an ad like this one, I'm just gonna open this up on a different browser. Sorry, Tableau, you probably paid money for this right now. What happens is that Tableau sets cookies, and there's a redirect happening on the website itself. Now, we can look into the cookies by opening up our developer tools right here and just looking into the application tab. And here we can see, when we scroll here to cookies, what cookies were set on this browser. Now, a cookie itself is just a little text file that has a name and a value. So you can find it later on by the right name, and you can read the value from it. Furthermore, it is always pegged to a domain. So a cookie that is set is really set to a domain. So in this case, google.com, but there should also be one that is pegged to this domain, which is tableau.com. And it has an expiry date. So this is when the cookie automatically gets deleted. Now, cookies are very important for our tracking because they actually identify the user uniquely to the tracking system. So once we come to the website and Google Analytics, for example, is running, then there is a cookie created, which is called _GA, and there's a client ID set. And now when I come back to the browser, Google Analytics would say, okay, this is the same user, and therefore we will put him into the same bucket, and you know all of these reports that get built by Google Analytics. Now, the tracking system itself can also not Google Analytics per se, but when you get redirected, for example, through a third-party service, like what happened when I clicked on this ad, I get redirected to the advertiser. But in between, there is a step where a third-party cookie, a cookie that is not pegged to this particular domain, is set. And this is, for example, the Google cookie, the Google advertising cookie. Now, they have many cookies in here. I don't specifically know what they all mean. But what happens is that Google, on this side, it set this third-party cookie, can re-recognize me when I go to an advertiser site. And these are typically called third-party cookies because they are on a different domain and not tableau.com. So what if when Apple announced and said, okay, we want to get basically better privacy and rid of these third-party cookies, they had different ITP protocols where they introduced certain preventions so people couldn't do this easily anymore. Now, a big change was actually the Intelligent Tracking Prevention 2.0, which came out last year. You might have remembered, because what happened is that they actually said, okay, all the third-party cookies will expire after 24 hours. So what that means is when you come from Facebook, for example, I have the Facebook pixel running, and Facebook sets their third-party cookie in order to re-recognize you on Facebook itself, this cookie would be deleted by the Safari browser automatically after this period of 24 hours. And therefore, if you came back to facebook.com like 48 hours later, you wouldn't see any ads from that advertiser because you wouldn't be able to be recognized, at least on the Safari browser. Now, this was a big change, and therefore, Facebook and all the other ad vendors, like Google Ads, for example, as well, introduced a method to actually set a first-party cookie, so it doesn't set on the domain of your third-party, google.com, but once you land on the site, it would take a little bit of JavaScript and push it into the first party, so into tableau.com. It sets a cookie on that first party. In that way, it would still be able to re-recognize you once you come back to Facebook, because it can get that data from their backend. So there's a unique identifier that gets sent over to Facebook once you land on the page. This is the cookie that you have on there, and they would be able to re-recognize you. So the mechanism wouldn't work through the third-party cookie anymore. Fair enough, third-party cookies are probably discussable if they are even necessary. But then you would still be able to do this advertising technique through the first-party cookie. Now, there's a big change coming, or it has already been implemented as far as I see it, which is ITP 2.1. Now, ITP 2.1 is a new standard, a evolution of this. And what it says all third-party cookies will be expiring. These are basically session cookies then. If the user leaves the website, they will be deleted and will expire automatically on the Safari browser. So all the third-party context will be lost in terms of what we do in the Safari browser. So third-party cookies are not good. But there was always the expectation, well, Safari still utilizes the first-party cookie. So if you push the data into the first-party cookie, we'll still be able to recognize. And this is what the big change was in the tracking systems last year, really. That was, I think it came out in September. So everybody prepared for this. And that's why, for example, if you are on Facebook and click on any link here, you always see nowadays in the URL, the actual, we don't want to watch this ad, the actual Facebook click ID here. And this is how Facebook would be able to re-recognize you and see that you have clicked on this ad and possibly send data to their systems as well. So this is something that Facebook introduced and changed their pixel around. So they actually pushed everybody to change their pixel because they had new technology in there. AdWords did the same because you had to now upgrade. There were multiple changes going on with the global site tag, but the new global site tag actually also sets a first-party cookie. So these will be recognized in the Safari browser. What was introduced just a few weeks ago is the ITP 2.1, and this actually caps all the first-party cookies in a 7-day window. So the expiration date will be set to the first-party of the first-party cookie is 7 days now. What does that mean? Just to show you, again, here we are on Tableau, and you can see the expiration date is sometimes really long. So for this cookie, it would be in 2021. Now, this doesn't mean that this cookie will exist, because users oftentimes change their browsers, or they get rid of these cookies by emptying their cache or emptying their privacy caches that you can go through and delete here in your settings. So it doesn't mean necessarily that it is there, but in a perfect scenario, this cookie would be retained for the next 2 years. And this is, for example, also the case with Google Analytics, right? So it sets it for 2 years. So if the user comes back on the same browser and he only has one browser installed, we would be able to see one user in Google Analytics, and that would be counted as one user. Now, if we take this URL and go over to a Safari browser, I'm luckily here on a Mac, so I have this installed. We also have like developer tools down here, and we can also look into the cookies. Now we see that there is a tableau.com, and there are no third-party cookies here. We have Lytics.io, which is probably an analytics tool, which got whitelisted. But all the other cookies that got set on a third party are no longer here. We see that all of the expiration dates are basically now within the next 7 days. So yeah, what's the day today? It's the 8th. Happy Women's Day, by the way. In 7 days, these cookies will be automatically deleted by the Safari browser. And therefore, what will happen, for example, for Google Analytics, the user comes back after 1 week. What happens? He would be re-recognized as a new user. So potentially you would see multiple users, although it's just one user. You would see multiple sessions, although it's just, well, it's multiple sessions, that's true. But every time this will be restarted. So this would also mean that we would have more inaccurate tracking, because if the user comes through Facebook the first week and comes back through direct or through another source, you wouldn't be able to reconnect them to that initial Facebook source as well. So big implications here, not only for the advertising side, but also for any other tracking, like affiliate tracking, like web analytics tracking, and personalization, for example. Because all of these technologies nowadays, the standard is really to use cookies for this kind of thing. So potentially the fallout is pretty big. And what I can say to this is that it is actually something that concerns me from a tracking perspective. Now, all of the vendors have reacted to ITP 2.0 and changed over their tracking. It will be interesting to see if the vendors will react pretty fast and try to do something else in order to make our tracking more accurate, and it will still work. My concern with this is that Apple and the WebKit team move pretty fast on this, right? They have announced this change on the 21st of, was it the 21st of February? And now it is pretty much already implemented, at least on my browser. It might be that they push out an update for iPhone in a future update. I don't have an iPhone, so I can't really test this, but it is pretty fast, right? Now, all the advertisers need to react to this. And the problem with it is that it sometimes, and this is what happened to ITP 2.0, really is just like they're reacting to it and they're finding some workaround. So the whole first party push was something that they implemented because you couldn't use third parties anymore, or it wasn't as accurate. And now Apple and the WebKit team are shutting that door down. So what will be the next rat race to actually install your cookies correctly? And they actually say this in their blog post and say, well, some people have just misused the first-party cookies, and that's not a solution, so we're gonna shut this door as well. Now, potentially, all the vendors need to come up with new solutions. Before we go into what you could do potentially in order to circumvent this, I would tell you, as a website owner, as a marketer, as somebody who maybe works with clients and needs to report on data, is to actually do a little bit of an impact analysis. Now, be aware that this change is coming to Safari. How big is Safari in the world of your accesses to your website? So how many users are actually using Safari on your site? You could look at statistics from broader sources and saying, okay, 80% of browsers are used on Chrome, so maybe it's not that big of a deal. But this is actually culturally and from a country-wise different. So I know in the US it's a little bit bigger, in Europe probably a little bit smaller, and I don't know about other countries. But what you can do is definitely go over to your Google Analytics and look up under audience right here. You open this and look at the technology reports and then browser and OS. So right here you see that there is Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and you can see the percentages of this is last month, so 28 days window, and this is the Google Merchandise Store demo account. So right here you have Chrome used by most of the probably Google employees, and then we have Safari with 16%. Now, what would this mean for you? And we see all of these metrics might be inflated later on because we get much more new users. We get much more users because maybe they are cut in two just because the cookies expire much earlier. And we will see that these metrics will be heavily skewed, although there are just one user. Now, you can look at this on the overall grand scheme and say, okay, it's just 16%. But how much does this actually matter to you in your business? So check your analytics in order to see what the impact might be and how you could explain numbers to your clients, for example. All right. Now, what can you do? There are actually methods in order to circumvent that. As I mentioned before, I don't know if they will still work a year from now, a month from now, because the WebKit team is working pretty fast. And we have seen if somebody abuses the system, abuse in that sense, they might change something again and get rid of that backdoor of that workaround. Nonetheless, there are some workarounds. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, cookies are little text files that are saved on the browser itself. To demonstrate this to you, you can simply take a little bit of JavaScript and put this into our demo shop. Let's go over here. Gonna open up the developer tools. Once this loads, is our demo shop loading? Yes, it is loading. And we can set up we can look into the cookies right here. And we can set up and see what cookies are actually set. And we can set our own cookie with a little bit of JavaScript. I have that somewhere already prepared, that little bit of JavaScript. Cookie. No, that's not it. Set cookie. Right here. We have a little bit of JavaScript. I'm going to execute this. This is something you could put into Google Tag Manager, for example, to set a cookie. And here we go. We can set the days, we can set the value and so on, and that would then show up as a first-party cookie in our applications. And this is normally how we save data in order to re-recognize the user on the next page view. Because as you might know, in JavaScript itself, JavaScript reloads every time you have a new user, you have a new page view. So it's not good for retaining data. Now, in the HTML5 standard, there was actually a new storage capability introduced, which is local storage or session storage. And that's what you see up here. So here we have local storage and session storage. In order to push something into this, we can utilize a little bit of different JavaScript, which is the, well, local storage. I have a lot of, here we go, which is much shorter, as you can see. You just have to have this line of JavaScript. I'm gonna execute this. And now we should see in the application under local storage on our demo shop, we have set local storage item right here with our test. And you can also see that local storage itself doesn't have an expiration. That means you would need to explicitly delete this if you don't want to get this data anymore, or have that data on your computer anymore. Or again, through a whole refresh or a purging of the privacy settings, this would go away as well. But a big difference here is that this would exist if the user doesn't purge this in any case throughout the lifetime of the user being cookied. Or not cookied in that sense, local storaged, if I might say it so. So it is a difference in how you set this and in how it works. The biggest difference though is that local storage can't work cross-domain or cross a subdomain, because as cookies, you can set a first-party cookie like demo shop, and it will put a dot in front of the domain so that you will be able to read that cookie even if you are on, for example, blog.demoshop.com or www.demoshop.com or on dev.demoshop.com or staging.demoshop.com. So even if you are on a subdomain, you can read that cookie. That is not possible if you use the local storage. And so people have, and the ad vendors have, actually liked the cookies method much better, and the HTML5 standard of local storage is not much used in the tracking sense, in the advertising sense of things. It is mostly used for the retaining of state in certain contexts. For example, if you have a single page application. That said, it is a viable method because what the intelligent tracking prevention says, it only concerns cookies right now. So anything that you do with local storage wouldn't be touched in that sense. So what you could do is henceforth not take the cookies as a storage mechanism, but the local storage. So there are already some other techniques that sprung up, and if you want to find out more about how you could, for example, use Google Analytics to push your client ID into the local storage and then utilize this as user ID, then you might are interested in the blog post by Simo, where he goes into more of the technical details on this. So definitely local storage is something that you could utilize, but unfortunately might just be something that you do for now, and then in 6 months they also shut that door if too many people are doing this. All right, another workaround is server-side tracking. Now, what we do here on the browser itself is something that is happening on the user's browser. So we set a cookie so we can recognize him if he comes to the next website. What we could also do is push that information up to our server and retain that information on the server itself. There are different techniques on this. I don't want to get into it right now because it's actually pretty complicated, and I don't have a really good use case here to show you, as this is actually server technology. So anything that runs on the server, there are certain languages that you would be familiar with if you know server technology, such as PHP, Ruby, or Node.js, where you would write and change the way the data is retained and how you can identify the user. So a good use case, or just an example, would be if the user has to log in to a site, right? Then the state might be something that the server retains in order for the user still to be logged in. That's something you could obviously, this technology could be used for tracking as well. Just the problem is that most of the vendors still utilize this client-side tracking technology, such as Google Analytics or the different other vendors out there. Now, there are a lot of workarounds on the server side. You could build proxies, you could set the cookie on the header once the page loads, the HTTP header, which also would not set the cookie in a sense on a JavaScript side, so it wouldn't be kept by 7 days. And so you would be safe from that as well. But it would obviously be something that you would need to do on the server side. So you potentially need to have a developer, you would potentially need to change your technology around, and you would potentially try to hack around in Google Analytics and how Google Analytics actually receives the crucial information of the client ID or the user ID. So if you want to find out more about this, again, head over to Simo's blog post where he looks at these different implementation solutions that he could think of. And it's really in-depth, really interesting, but at the same time, I think for me and for others out there, not really doable from a perspective of trying to look at this from implementing it right now. Now, what I guess from a tracking perspective in terms of the server-side solution, what will come much more, and I read it on different affiliate sites already, so affiliate vendors that have the big affiliate networks out there, they obviously give their advertisers and their publishers a certain tracking piece, which was always a JavaScript code which they could install. Now they need to think about different solutions, and what I have read already is we will try to build plugins. So server-side code that actually you can plug into your WordPress blog, Magento blog, Magento site, Shopify, and so on. So the data will be retained server-side, which I think that, yeah, it is technically the solution to it. But unfortunately, some people will miss out if you have a custom CMS and not something from WordPress and so on. It will also increase the overhead. So maybe that one affiliate network has one plugin, but then maybe then Google Analytics has a plugin and so on. So we have hundreds of plugins installed on our WordPress site, which is also slowing down the site as well. So I'm not a big fan. And obviously it takes away a bit of the power from us marketers to install any kind of tracking like Google Tag Manager. I don't know, I can't say if it will become obsolete, but that's too early to say. But it's a shame if I look at this and say, well, I don't know if it's gonna hold up in the future, and maybe it will take the power away. So I have to run to my developer and tell him to implement one or two things because it is actually running server side. All right, that is the other thing that you can do, and that's the other workaround. Now I want to talk about the last workaround that I think is also a viable option once you have done your impact analysis, is to just wait for it. Now we have seen quick reactions from Google and Facebook last time around, so maybe they're coming up with some solution, and it's in the end they are bringing the server, the tracking technology to you as a website owner or to your clients, and they should be reacting to this. So from my perspective, it's something that I can only hope for, but I think because it's their business model, they will react pretty fast and try to put something in place. It's always also good to remember that this is a tracking that is only prevented now on Safari. So for now, the impact is maybe small, but Firefox has also announced that they will have their own tracking prevention. And who knows? Chrome is obviously a browser made by Google, and Google is one of the ones that want people to see advertising, and that is probably their big strategy behind it was at the beginning to say, let's establish a browser here that we have control over. So who knows what Chrome will do in that regard? We have different players in this field, and unfortunately we as website owners or marketers are right now a little bit left in the dark. And I don't know what the perfect solution to this is. I think if you look at local storage and the server-side tracking, these are definitely valuable methods, but it's not something that I would jump on right away and change over my tracking just to change it next month again in order to catch up with these tracking prevention things. I hope that there will be a solution in the future, either from the vendor side, but also that Apple will let us know about such changes a little bit more in advance and really talk to the advertisers as well, because this is really what makes the internet. Advertisers out there are also looking at this and saying, well, we need the revenue as well. And if we can't cookie or can't show retargeting, then maybe we will lose out on ad space because people don't want to book that advertising anymore. On the other hand, obviously for Apple users and for people who use Safari browsers, it is a better experience for them, maybe. And there is definitely a trade-off between who is in the right here. And so I would hope that it is figured out at some point and we don't have to react suddenly to something like this. Yes. All right. So I hope you took away most of the things that we talked about here and know what to do with ITP 2.1, what's coming up. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and definitely subscribe to the channel, because I will answer some questions after this live stream. And if you want to be on next time and don't watch this replay, then definitely hit that subscribe button. Now, my name is Julian. Till next time.